Welcome back. Next up, we got the '03 Mercedes-Benz CLK320 Cabriolet, because America, with the 3.2-liter six-cylinder naturally aspirated. Complaints on this one: we have no power top operation, and apparently this car only gets out handful of times a year. They last time it was driven, no problems, and then they went to pull it out sometime previously on a nice day to go enjoy the cabriolet way, apparently, and the power top won't work. It doesn't go down. He said that the button in the center console will flash, and that there's a flash decoder in the owner's manual that tells you it's got some sort of switch malfunction or something. I haven't pulled that out yet, but we'll go record that, dig through the owner's manual, and read what he read. I run this thing in here last night because I got curious about it, but I didn't work on it, or I didn't want to work on it. But I got a code scan with a bunch of codes, and then pulled up some service information stuff, and after digging through, just reading a little bit, that's all the further I got. I did notice a couple things. Well, let's roll you on over to the car. Apparently, it don't matter whether you plug this thing in up under the dash. Oh yeah, so we're plugged in the round 38-pin connector over yonder. Apparently, you need that to get all the non-powertrain module stuffs. But it doesn't matter if you plug in there or plug in under the dash. It still asks you to select which connector you're going through. We got the 38-pin, so we'll hit F3. And this is going to think forever. Once this goes through and pulls a bunch of codes, I will bring you back for that review. Well, after one whole eternity later, we've got some codes. You know, as intelligent as this car and scan tool are supposed to be, you would think that it would be able to auto ID the VIN and pull these codes faster. But I guess we get what we get. We have all kinds of codes and all kinds of modules, but most of them are like voltage stuff. Voltage supply, stopwatch, lamp, whatever. And then we've got traction control, has not been initialized, steering angle sensor, doesn't have any complaints about that. All these are stored, by the way. Airbag, voltage supply, and code of service manual. Instrument cluster, battery not charged. CAN bus something, voltage supply, door stuff, whatever. Voltage supply, alarm is activated. Voltage supply. What else we got? Here's, I think, our most interesting one is this rollover bar soft top control module. Apparently this thing has an active roll bar since it's a convertible. I think if you get in an accident, it deploys either the rear headrest or some bar contraption pops up out of nowhere to keep you from decapitating yourself. But we got these three codes, and I'll make specific note of these for future reference. B1000, something faulty, B1010, voltage supply, 1650-001. We've got limit switch problem. And then voltage supply, can, voltage supply, can, voltage supply, resistance, can, and then nothing else all the way down there. But these three, I want to draw your specific attention to, because these are the codes I looked up, and that left us with a whole bunch of nothings. Since when I scanned this last night, and I saw all these same voltage supply codes, pretty much as far as I stopped on the vehicle, but I wanted to hook up the battery charger to it, and my battery charger's got a switch that says you want a standard or an AGM system. So I just opened the trunk, and I guess I can spin you for this. We just opened the trunk to see what kind of battery it's got. It's got a normal standard battery in it, nothing special. But in opening the trunk, I did see a pair of jumper cables laying on the spare tire. So that indicates my summation, my guess, my hypothesis, if you would, is this thing sat in the garage forever. The battery started to get low. They tried to start it, wouldn't start, and then everything got grumpy with it, and they jump started it. Obviously, we got a charger on her now, but I'm curious if this thing's just super sensitive, and since it saw a voltage issue, it's like, we're not doing power top stuff anymore. And so I wanted to just clear that out, but do that on camera and see if that actually fixes the issue. No clue if it will or not, but also want to check inside. We'll take the dirty stuff off because the car's clean, and we'll do the switch operation and see what the owner's manual says about it. I feel like there's one other thing that I was going to talk about, and I don't remember what it was, but let's jump inside and see what that switch does to try to open the top up. Oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say else. The B code's super, not useful on this thing. So we'll click B code charts. We've got our B1000. If you remember, I'm looking at another thing off screen. Our B1000 was in the rollover bar soft top control module. Let me bring that over here. This is our rollover bar soft top control module. B1000, B10, B1650. And when we come over here and we click the B1000, you can see the path takes us to the radio, no matter what. Now, the radio did also set a B1000, but that's not the module that set this code. So the B1000 is rollover bar soft top operation is control module is faulty, which is interesting. And we've got only the best, most transparent information from Mercedes. Thanks, guys. When we click the B1000 stuff, everything in here is radio code stuff. The entire radio, here's your complaint problem, and your entire radio is not working. The display doesn't work. CD operation doesn't work. A speaker doesn't work. You got poor radio reception, blah, 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 blah. All of these things take you to really just the next step. And then here we've got some very high-tech code descriptions. B1000 is what this says. Possible causes: radio internal fault. Which, cool. That's fun. And even if we keep going on, I think that's it. There's no more 1000s. So super not helpful there. That's the end of our list on these pages. Let's go back. Our next code in the list was B1010. Oh, look. Radio voltage again. Again, B1010 is in the soft top control module. Recall, I can kind of get it on the screen. B1010 in the rollover whatever module. And yeah, whatever. And it got us back to the radio. I think we can go to the next page. Yeah, it doesn't say anything there. Okay, cool. Well, let's ignore that one. Let's go to B1650, 001 is our next. We go from 1088 to 1761. Oh, well, okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe if we go back to the B code charts, we'll just go here. Oh, look, they got a B1010 there. We could click that. Oh, look, it took us back to the exact same page we were on. Okay, well, we'll ignore the B1010 again. Let's go back to B1650. We've got the 1650 doesn't exist. So, super helpful information, thanks Mercedes, but it is described as fault in soft top actuation process. The limit switch status is implausible. Let's go inside the car and see the operation. One other thing I did forget to talk about, I did look up TSBs, and there was a TSB for no control module no power top operation down or up, and it said check the roll bar because if it deploys, that's how I knew that information. If it deploys, then it shuts down power top operation. And looking in the back of it, I don't really see a roll bar, but we got headrests, and then I got the owner's manual popped open here. Pretty cool info. Roll bar head restraints rear. The rear head restraints are integrated into the roll bar. So it seems like them dudes will pop up if you're in the event of a rollover or accident to save your head. We'll still looking for the light info. Right on, we're gonna unlatch our top dude. I think you turn it, and I think this will, oh yeah, the windows are now rolling down on their own. We'll pop this up. So she's sitting gapped. We got our light on here, and it says to pull and hold. And then blinky, blinky, blinky is what we get. Then we try to push it down, nothing. Oh, there's a slow blink now. So it was fast blink and then slow blink, which is interesting. What's it do now? Slow blink. Well, that's interesting. We got two little failure modes. It says, and there's manual. Vindicator blinks slowly. Malfunction has occurred in the system. Well, we gather that. Vindicator blinks rapidly. The trunk lid or luggage cover may be open and need to be closed. Well, everything's closed in the back, but for sure, we got no operation. We got blinky lights. Let's go ahead and try to clear out those codes and see what happens after. Another thing to draw your attention to, when we go to this module, I'm pretty disappointed overall. When we actually go into the module, it doesn't give us any options to do anything. You can like read codes, unknown version of control module, that's helpful. And then we have ECU information, which is just, I think all your, yeah. And then trouble codes, which we already know. But even when I click, this is something new I've never done. It says vehicle data. I think you have to have some special subscription, and I haven't done that yet. So maybe I'll come back to that at a later date. But the first thing we're going to try and do is erase codes. I want to see, I want to see if this is actually going to affect anything. I'm curious if the voltage issues made this thing grumpy. Ignition switch off and then back on after 10 seconds. All right, let's close this door. Let's turn the ignition switch off. Ignition switch is off. And then wait approximately 10 seconds, which I probably won't cut this out. I'm just watching the timer on the camera. We're about halfway there. All right, we should be past our 10 seconds. Let's come back in and key her on again. We got key on. Have the, yes, establishing communication. No codes detected. Alrighty. That was the other thing I was a little grumpy. I guess I didn't try it from the home menu, but the inability to read a bunch of live data like switch positions and stuff I thought was kind of dumb. So we still have the roof popped up out of its deal. Come back down here. And we have a slow blink. Looks like we got an actual problem. We're going to have to do some diag. Wouldn't be as easy as a code clear. That's okay. Let's get some wiring diagrams. See what this old dude's got for switches. And actually, I lied. We should have, in theory, set a new code. Let's come back and check our codes real quick. Read codes. What do we have? Fault in soft top actuation process. The limit switch status is implausible. So even though this code doesn't exist anywhere, what I'm going to look for specifically in service info is the limit switch. Let's figure out how that limit switch operates. See if we can't trick it and see what that does as far as maybe getting this thing to go. Just in case anyone was wondering, I did go back through it. All of these menus were at the vehicle profile level. There's nothing in here besides a little bit of programming of whatever, and it doesn't have anything to do with power top stuff. So I guess I could have made that part a little bit more clear. Like, it does have module selection for here, but when you enter these, it takes you to the exact same place that we were before when we actually were going and entering modules from the control list as unknown version. Still have the same thing over there, and then whatever, yeah, trouble codes. Obviously, our one code's still going to be there. So it takes us back to the same place. I think in the future, we're going to do a longer retainer for convertible tops, but we're making some progress. Let me catch up on what we got. Let's get this old girl flipped around. Okay, wiring diagrams for power top stuff. Everything highlighted in yellow is something that says limit switch, where you can see soft top cover limit switch closed, soft top limit switch locked, so locked or unlocked. Up here we've got left switch latch. I think that's for like above the pillars. And then we have all of these switches down here on the bottom. And when we go through service info, which is a little bit lackluster, thanks a bunch Mercedes, they don't really give us locations for all of these switches very well. But all of these switches go to the power top control module. And when we go into service info, where are we? Service info for the rollover bar soft top operation control module, it guides us right here above the left rear wheel well. Even if we zoom in, left rear wheel well. Let me promise you, it's not there. I will say, huge shout out to the auto repair guys on YouTube. I will link them because without them, I'd have been a little bit worse for wear on this. In case you wanted to know, first of all, you got to pull all those layers of rear trunk stuff out. And once all those layers of rear trunk stuff are out, you will find that under that shelf, there's a few modules. So this power top is apparently hydraulic, and we've got, this thing has a Bose sticker on it. I assume that's an amplifier. It's got giant cooling fins, and I see a giant subwoofer up there. And then we have those two modules. I don't know what they are. I'm going to take pictures of the part numbers and Google search those part numbers. But my next plan, I was trying to figure out how to attack this because the service info doesn't give us anything really about locations. And after pulling all that stuff apart, half of these, even according to service info, half of these switches are behind like where the B pillar would be on interior panels and whatever. That's kind of disastrous. So my plan, get my pointing apparatus. My plan is all of these switches go to this module. It looks like all of these switches just switch to ground. So these are ground locations. Even up here, we got a ground location. And so one would assume that, I don't know how the natural rest position of it is, but we will figure it out. So here's my plan. If we look at some of these specifically, you will see this says RB. I don't know. I assume that's right hand. I don't know. But extended limit switch. And then next to it says retracted limit switch. One would assume, at least I am going to assume, that when one of the power top is in one, like the locked or open position, this will be in one position, and then this one would be in the opposite position. And so that's going to be my test procedure. I'm going to assume that most of these are, open, closed, as far as like power top up, power top down, top switches. And I'm going to assume that when they talk about being, like, again, top open, top closed, when I talk about those, whether the power top is actually open or closed, I'm going to assume those are in opposite positions. But either way, all those go to this module. So I'm just going to back probe all these pins where all these switches go to and see if one stands out from the rest. So if we have, I think you get what I'm saying, but if we got a left and right switch or whatever, or an open or closed switch, and they're both in the same switch position, opened or closed, when the top is open or closed, I'm going to assume that that would be our irregular pattern. And so then we'll just do some circuit manipulation and see what pops up. But that's it. I got to figure out which one of those modules under there is this dude. We'll take some pictures, do some Google searches, and then back probe some of these wires. Right, when we do one part number search, we get this thing that's called a communication control module phone something. And when we, oh yeah, communication control module. And when we search the other part number, it looks like this dude, we get roof control ECU. It looks like this is the module we're going to go after. So we'll peel the connector cover off and start looking for wires. Right on. We have one switch figured out so far. We got the connector cover peeled off. Very cavernous, spots to back probe. So really, really like that. Super cool. I'm just going through these one by one, trying to figure out what's what. So we know that, back this up. We know that the initial unlock works because as soon as you pull that lever down and twist it, all the windows roll down. So that switch is good. We know that. But trying to figure out which switch that is in a car versus which it is in a diagram is what we're at next. The lock switch is not that one. Page 2, that one up there. Our soft top locked limit switch is our one. So we've got that probed in there. We'll run into the car. Oh, I don't know if I can get all this in one shot, but soft top is closed at the moment. And I can't get it all in the same screenshot. Anyway, maybe we're going to, well, whatever. Let's reset this. You're just going to have to trust me. We'll do it this way with the greatest glare. All right, we're at 0 volts. We have that thing locked. We're going to flip it down and rotate it. And when we rotate it, we get 12 volts. It looks like all of these switches, God, that glare. It looks like these switches are likely going to be 12 to 0 volts, and I'm going to relock it. It is relocked, it drops to 0. We got one figured out. This is going to be the same process I'm going to do for the rest of them, and until I can figure out what's what. Let's play catch up here. We have mapped out all of the wires to all the switches with the voltages present while we were doing our testings and whatnot. So some of these are 12 volts, some of them are 0 volts. And to test these out, the ones that are 12 volts, I'm going, obviously, back up. We don't know which switch is causing the problem, and half of them are 12, half of them are 0, but all of them seem to be 12 or 0, so it seems like we have a 12 volt pull down design for most of these switches, but we don't know, or at least I don't know, if a lot of these are supposed to be normally open, normally closed, what position they're supposed to be in. Even with the description, it doesn't really give me a great indication. But at the control module, so all of these, dropping all these so's. These wires are all going to go back to the control module on this side. Some of these are going to be our 12 volts, some of these are going to be our 0 volts. If we got 12 volts coming out of the module, I'm going to take that to switch to ground manually, and then we're going to do that one by one for all of the switches and see one by one if the power top starts to work. For the ones that are already 0, for example, if one of these switches that reads 0 volts on the wire coming out of the module is supposed to be 12 volts, we need to get that back to 12 volts. And obviously, if one of these switches is stuck closed, then we don't want to apply 12 volts to the wire because that'll just cause a direct short, doing Morrow and jumper wire, and that's an issue for sure. So the idea that I have is whichever ones are 0 volts coming out of this module, I'm actually going to pull that pin out of the connection cavity and then replug this connector back in. That way the module should see 12 volts on that pin, and that would change its internal logic for whatever position a switch is supposed to be in. Then we will do that one by one and see which one of these switches is the one that triggers our top to start working correctly, assuming we only have one switch failed, which is a hope for sure. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. When one of those starts to work, then we got to figure out where that dude is in the car. But we'll bring you back when I figure that next step out. Here is where I left off. Have all of our voltages as they were when the vehicle showed up, and every single one of these pins, whether if it was 12 volts, we pulled it to ground. If it was 0 volts, we depended out of the control module, and in between every single test of each one of these wires, I would key on, make sure codes were cleared, key it off, key back on, make sure codes were still cleared, and then because sometimes faults would set during this. And during that process, I made sure we actuated the top, or at least the button, when there were no codes present, and did it for every single one of these. And we had no change. When we hold that button until it in the middle center console, and when it starts flashing, then it sets our 1610 or whatever that code was that says the switch plausibility. Now, my next thoughts were, because I just started running a little bit wild with it, had no change. So we have a switch correlation code or a switch implausibles code, and none of the switches are, well, none of the switches really should be having issues at this point, because it's possible, let's say, it's possible, but I don't think it's probable that we have more than one switch has, I cannot speak. I don't think it's quite as probable to have more than one switch failed at once. I think that if we were setting that switch plausibility code, likely only one of these switches would have been bad. Now, certainly, perhaps that two of these switches did fail in the same event, and now I don't have any idea, what way they failed, what way they're supposed to be. The test that I did would only tell me if one of these switches was bad. We have, at this point, then two other possibilities. One is, first possibility, more than one switch is bad, and I have to just test the right combination of all the previous tests that I did in order to get the thing to work, which isn't going to happen at the end of the day. Or two, the control module says it's got a switch problem and it doesn't have a switch problem. And I'm leaning towards that, but I don't have the test cases because we've got like 10 switches here or something total between these two pieces of paper. And to go through every single combination of all of these open and closed manually is just not something that's going to happen. And last thing that I was thinking was, when I actuate that button, I can hear some relays clicking in the rear, like some noises and whatnot. And so I was curious if this motor was actually getting powered up. So we've got an electric motor that powers a hydraulic circuit, and the canopy is hydraulically actuated by this motor. What I did then is I should have recorded it, but I didn't. I took a scope and I scoped this wire here coming into the motor, and this wire comes from a relay switch. And for just a few milliseconds, I will get power through this motor, and then it will quit. Just a few milliseconds, and it's pretty repeatable until you hold the switch in the center console that causes the code to set. As long as you don't set that code, every time I hit that switch, I get power hit here. And that made me curious, okay, is this motor causing a current issue? What I then did is, where this relay outputs to this motor, I replaced this motor in circuit with a 4 amp test light. And so I ran test light from here to ground and then ran the same sequence. I did not have a test light illuminate. I had the exact same performance, just for a few milliseconds. It would have power to the test light, but it wasn't enough to turn it on. Likewise, inside this motor, there is a thermal protection switch, and this is a resistor. And the way I figured that out was, that was my next thought. Well, okay, if we're not powering up the test light, that means the control module's shutting down this power to this motor circuit for some reason. Why would that happen? And obviously, here we have this thermal protection. And then naturally, I questioned that. What I did here was I replaced this thermal switch-in circuit with a test light, and as soon as I did that, when I keyed on, I got a code that says, hey, the resistance is changed for this over temp protection, and it set a fault against it. So it said short to ground, but it wasn't. I run it through a test light just in case it did have current going through it. But that tells me this circuit is good. And it's interesting. It's got like 4 volts coming in on one side and then 0 volts coming on the other side. So definitely some thermal changes there to cause resistance changes to, I assume, cause a difference in circuit voltage on this end. But that said, this is good. We got just momentary power on here, and we still have that B1000 code. And that B1000 code, let me pull those up. Here's our codes that we were pulling before. This B1000 keeps showing up. Even though service information only gives us anything about the radio, if it sits in the radio, it is set in this rollover module. And the definition is control module, rollover bar, blah, 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 is faulty. And so at that point, when I have this code that sets periodically, as I was doing the testing with the switches, if I hold that center console switch, the 1650 would always come back. But this would occasionally, I'd say maybe just under half a dozen times, this B1000 would also come back. And so to me, when I have this fault and I don't have a single switch failure, as in the testing that we did, if there was one switch failure, we would have found it with the test that we did. I think it's implausible that we have two switches failed simultaneously at the same time, especially the vehicle being in good shape. To me, all of this stuff here says this module is bad. That is my current position, and we will, I think I'll think on this off camera for a while, but I don't have anywhere else to go. Certainly possible that this thing is smarter than me, and we don't have all the right service information. That's always a possibility. But at this point, all I can do is tell the customer what I found, make a recommendation. And if it was, I always ask myself, flip this. Of course, I'm always asking, well, if the module doesn't fix it, what would you replace next? And there's nothing in any of this diagram that I would replace next. I see nothing unless you're going to replace every single switch, which those things are buried in the car. I don't see anything else that could be. And so then I also ask myself, well, okay, well, you replace the module and that doesn't fix it. What are you going to test next? And I don't have anything to test next. If the module doesn't fix this car, I don't know what's wrong with this car. I really don't. I have no idea at this point. And I'll tell the customer just that. I will be as transparent as always. Let them know what I found. We'll maybe get some price quotes on this module, see if they're even available, and touch base with the customer again, and we'll go from there, see what happens. Filming the closing for our Mercedes CLK issue power top deal. Gave the customer all the information I had, and when I was pulling it out of the shop to the parking lot, obviously I had all the windows down doing power top testing, so I went to roll all the windows up. It's got 4 windows, 2 in the front and those little half windows in the back. When I went to roll the windows up, the driver window would roll all the way up, but then when I opened the driver door, it would pop down about like 2.5 inches or so, and that's too much. Now that car does have the design where when you open the doors, it'll pop it down like a 1/4 inch to clear the convertible top seals on the side, and then when you close it, it'll just pop back up that 1/4 inch or whatever. But this wasn't happening. It actually was jumping down like 2.5 inches, and then when I closed the door, it wouldn't go back up. And even when I hit the switch in the center console, it wouldn't go back up with the door open. Close the door, like that thing you could roll the window up, and as soon as you open the door, it'd pop that window down, key on or off, doesn't matter. As soon as you open the door, it'd pop that window down, you close the door, and it'd stay there. So I couldn't get out without this window being rolled down because it did it every time. What I ended up doing was turn the key on, open the driver door, close the driver door, run around to the passenger door, open that door, roll the driver window up, and then keyed off, closed passenger door, and then the passenger door window looked normal. That's how we got the window closed. What I then did after that weird behavior, I'll add in another one for you that I didn't really talk about because I didn't know if it was just me and it wasn't real consistent. But after I saw that, I started messing with it. Or after we had the weird window deal, I started messing with it. The switches in the middle, there's 4 window switches in that center console. And if you start manipulating the window switches more quickly, like kind of fast, like you're in a hurry, the windows would not respond typically. And I think all of them had dual detents for auto down and it did lose the auto down and up. It did lose some of the auto features, but the customer said that happens whenever the battery dies. You got to do a relearn. That makes sense. But even on the single detent, I was getting some erratic response from the windows when I would kind of move them quickly, or if I would try to be fast and like push all four window switches at the same time with my fingers, like all four, like to roll them all down or up, it wouldn't work right. Or they had all four start coming up and then one would stop and the rest would go up and then another one would kick in. So just kind of odd, erratic behavior and responses to the switches. So after that happened, and obviously I wasn't filming for that deal, come back in and look at service info. Those window switches, all four switches, go to the rollover top module. Another flag. It says, hey, that module's bad. At the end of the day, because Mercedes doesn't share our B1000 or whatever internal module fault code, because they don't actually decode or give a diagnostic process or step for that module, it always brings us back to radio. To me, I just told the customer, listen, Mercedes doesn't share the information for this specific module, but if we put all the pieces together, if it were my vehicle that I were spending my own money on, I'd be putting a module in. I see nothing else that really stands out. I still, even after sitting and thinking, I still think it's very implausible that we had multiple switches fail at the exact same time. If you say drove it one day, it's fine. The next time we pulled it out, it doesn't work. I doubt, and it's parked in a garage, taken good care of. I don't think we had two switches go out on that. Also, when we had that like read data deal, when you're looking at trouble codes, you can apply for the subscription for something. It was like $600, and we're not doing that, so we didn't get. I don't know if there actually would have been useful data in there. Not very well may have been, and I just don't have that experience. That's totally fine. But I told the customer everything I had, and last thing that just kind of put the process to a stop here is that car still uses apparently it's a single wire for module flash, and I don't have the hardware that will flash over single wire. Like the newer stuff where it's doing over CAN, we could do that on the Mercedes, but I don't have the hardware to do the old single wire stuff. So even if we do get a module for it, I can't flash it anyway. And so that's what I told the customer, and he said, I appreciate the work. I kind of want to get a second opinion, see if there's somebody else out there that can get a little bit more information on the switches. And I said, totally understand that. Obviously going to encourage the use of a dealer, but the reason he came here first is he kind of wanted to avoid the dealer. But I think he's also got somebody that he knows who's a Mercedes Master Tech or something. It's like, cool, yeah, for sure. Go ask, go find out. I asked him to tell me if they do put a module on it, if that fixes it, I'd like to know to close the loop on my end. But this one I can't fix, even if I made the right call. That was what I told him. I don't have the hardware to flash it, so nothing I can do with it, which is kind of a bummer. I should have checked that before I started, but I also didn't really know what we were getting into, especially since we thought we were dealing with more switch stuff as opposed to module failure. Perhaps we should have known, being Mercedes. And when I called the Mercedes dealer to ask about a replacement module, they said that the only thing that exists is refurb units, and there's a core charge on it, so they're constantly refurbing those. Tells me it's likely a high failure part, most probable, if they're still doing, what year was that thing, an 03, if they're still offering parts for an 03 via refurbished process, that thing probably fails quite a bit. But that's it. I couldn't fix it. I don't know what to tell you. That sucks. I guess that's just the way it goes sometimes. Hope my testing ideas were at least helpful for somebody out there for testing switches. I still think that was a very good way to test if we had a single switch failure. But that's all I got for you. Catch y'all in the next one.